Hi everybody, my name is Hannah and this is Pepper and Pine and I have a project to share with you today. We are going to be making a graham cracker masjid using super simple ingredients that you can find in your local grocery store. We have some graham crackers, we have some meringue cookies, and then we have some powdered sugar to make our icing and a couple other extras in order to make decorations for our graham cracker masjid. So the first thing you're going to do is add some powdered sugar to a small bowl. You can add some vanilla for flavoring if you'd like, and then we're going to mix that with a little bit of water to make our icing. Now you can have a really wet icing or a drier icing. It kind of just depends on your preference. We're also going to use some graham crackers and we're going to cut them in half. So they already have sort of like a perforation in the middle. So they're pretty simple just to snap in half. You want them to be as square as possible and all the pieces as similar in size as possible. So I'm going to dip it into the frosting, which the thicker frosting will hold better and dry quicker, and a more moist or a more liquidy frosting will be nice for decorating the edges, which you can do before you assemble your masjid. And so I'm going to show you a couple different ways to do this. But the hard part is having it all set together and sort of glue in place. That part does need 2 sets of hands, and it does take a little while to have that frosting act as a glue. So I'm going to just add a little bit more. I'm not using any special tools for this, but if you have baking tools or frosting tools, then I highly recommend that you use them. I'm just going to use a fork and add a little bit of frosting on each of those corners so that it can hold together a little bit better. And I'm also going to add a little frosting right on the top so that we can add a roof to our masjid. And once we get our frosting all on all the edges, which if it's thicker, it won't drip as much and it will seal quicker. And if it's more thin, then it will get into all of those corners a little bit easier. And don't worry about it getting on the wax paper. We're going to lift them up and put them on a tray later on. Okay, so we're going to glue our little meringue on top. Now you can also make your own meringues, but I found that being able to buy all of these things at a local grocery store makes it a lot easier to do this project because it's already going to be a time-consuming project. It's going to be a little bit messy as well. So we have these wafers as well that are going to make up our minarets, and then we have some white chocolate chips that we're going to use just to top the minarets, just for a little bit of decoration. So I'm going to dip it into that frosting, or the icing rather, in order to make it like a glue. And what's great is that these are actually really tasty. So we did eat them once we were done assembling them. So with the icing, I'm going to do a couple of different variations. So for this one, we're going to spread the icing all over the graham cracker and let it set in place before we assemble the masjid. So we're going to get a little bit of a different look. So this icing is still pretty thick, so it's going to dry or set pretty quickly. We are going to add a little bit of powdered sugar on top, which is going to give it a nice look, but you can go for a few different varieties. You can also just leave the icing plain like we did here, which is going to kind of give it like a marble exterior. Okay, so we're going to begin assembling this one here because now it is pretty much set and we are ready to put those graham cracker pieces together, which is the most challenging part of this whole project. You kind of need to hold it in place until it sets a little bit, and then you want to let it dry or harden completely before you remove it from the wax paper. You can see that it will fall apart really easily, but once you get the roof on top, sometimes that kind of holds everything in place pretty well. And so if you can just get to that part, which just takes a couple of minutes and 2 sets of hands. So I'm going to add a little bit of frosting to the corners here just to make sure that it stays really well together. And then we want to add just a little bit of frosting right on the roof so that we can put that dome, which is just a meringue cookie, which you could also bake from scratch as well. And then a little frosting on these minaret pillars, which are some wafer cookies. You want to be delicate with this. We did break a few by accident by thinking that they were set, but they weren't, and they tipped over and fell down and broke. So that's just something to be careful about. It does take a couple minutes for everything to dry. All right, so we're adding our little chocolate chips to the very top of our minarets just for a little added decoration, and I really like the way that this one turned out. All right, so we are going to try a couple different variations for our frosting, and I have added some cocoa powder to our sugar. I've added some water, but I've added too much water, so go slowly on the water because you just need a little bit. Now, the cocoa powder is going to make this difficult to combine in a smooth way, so we're going to add it to our NutriBullet, and you can see that it is quite wet, so I'm adding some more powdered sugar, but it's actually not enough, so go easy on that water. And the cocoa powder makes it harder for everything to get incorporated. You don't have to blend it this smoothly, but it does give you a nice finish. All right, so now we are going to make some chocolate frosting for our graham crackers. We're going to spread it all the way to the edge. I think it looks super beautiful. So we decide that we're going to dunk one of those domes or the meringue cookies in chocolate. And it looks really nice, but actually as a finished Masjid, graham cracker Masjid, it didn't look quite as good. And I ended up sprinkling everything with some powdered sugar as it began to dry. Now, because this is a really wet frosting, it's going to take a really long time to dry. You don't want to assemble it while it's wet, otherwise everything's just going to fall right off. So I have these chocolate chunks and I'm going to put them on the 4 walls of this Masjid as decoration. It kind of looks like tile work, and I thought that it looked really nice. But of course, I cover everything with some powdered sugar in the end. All right, so back to one of our more simple designs. We're going to put some frosting on these graham crackers, and then I'm going to take a little bit of that chocolate frosting and I'm going to drizzle it over the top. And I really like the way that this looks. It almost looks like marble. It looks very tasty. And we're going to use a skewer just to mix those frostings together, just to give it a nice kind of marbly look. Now, I really like the way that this one looks when it's wet, but it doesn't dry quite the same. You lose a lot of that sheen as it dries. Okay, so here's a look at all of them kind of prepped and ready to be assembled. It was really hard being patient until they all sort of dried to assemble them. But here's a look at the projects that we did that day, not just assembling our graham cracker Masjid, but also we made some crescent and star cookies as well. And here's a closer look. Even a couple of days later, it still looks really good. Some of those more magnificent ones, we waited to eat until the very end. We ate all of our broken pieces and our mess ups first, and they were quite tasty. So here's a look at some of the other ones that we did with the marble and the chocolate dome, which are okay. They did look nice. They are tasty, but I really like the one that was all white. I hope you enjoyed this little project that we did. Don't forget to check out the blog post that accompanies this video for more information. You can find that link down in the description box below. If you'd like to see some of our other cooking tutorials, you can tap on the screen right now. You can also find that link down in the description box below. If you'd like to see what kind of projects we're doing on a daily basis, you can find me on Instagram at Pepper and Pine.